And so animism, like I said before, it's or rather, voodoo is a branch of animism, or it sprungs from the same, you know, roots as animism. And in the movie, I saw a lot of, elements of animism within centers. And like I said before, there's two main religions that are shown. I mean, it's not the only two, but the two main religions that are kind of in conflict with each other is Christianity and Voodoo. Um, and the plot pretty much is about two twins played by Michael B. Jordan. I think it's Smoke and Stack. I think is their names, which reminds me for some reason of Cain and Abel. In a sense. But well, let's proceed anyways. I'll have to get into it because there's a lot to this movie. The one thing that I like about this movie is how it says many things without really saying a lot. And that's part of the reason why I like the Bible as well, because it says a lot with only a couple of words. It's not very specific, but then it makes you think about it. Like there's several examples. I don't want to get into it. Don't want to deviate, but basically, these two twins, they're running away from their past of violence, and they want to do something that isn't as violent, that kind of reminds them of why they do it. And really what they want to do as human beings is they want to be happy. They want to have sex with someone they love, and they want to party. They want to have a good time. And so, coming from war, because these two were in the military and served their country, and they came back and they were good at killing. So they since they had no job here, they turned to crime, and they worked for Al Capone in Chicago, I believe. Yeah, well, yeah, that's where Al Capone was from. And doing the dirty work for Al Capone. And eventually they decide to not do that, and later it's known that it's because they stole from them and got away with a lot of their money. And they still don't know who it was that did it or whatever. Um, so and basically they what they want to do is make business out of the only thing in their life that they find pleasure in, that doesn't require death, that doesn't require stealing, which is a juke joint. A place to where people can gather together, have a good time, and listen to music. Which is about as non-violent as you could get, and as closer to peaceful things as possible to them. So they don't want to hurt. You could tell, like, just by what they're doing, that they don't want to hurt anybody anymore. They want to make money off of the happiness of really of their own people. To be I mean, if you look at it, that's what it seems like. But there's still one thing that they have that they can't let go of, and this movie talks about it very clearly. I think it's one of the main emphasis of the movie is the love of money, and that's what Smoke and Stack can't really let go of. And there's another character in the movie that is the the guitar player, and he's a blues guitar player. I love the blues, by the way. It's one of my favorite genres, and it's pretty much the father of American music. In modern music, to be honest with you. And I love the blues, and I incorporate it into my own guitar playing style. It is, the gift that keeps on giving, and they talk about it in this movie, and emphasize that what the blues is, to Americans and to black people, um, and that's what one of the things that I love about the movie. But Mr. I forgot his name. I know he's based on uh, the guy from the Crossroads, but I forgot his name. Um, uh, but yeah, he was the legend is that he was an okay player, and then he went to the cross. And there's different versions of the story. He went to Crossroads somewhere in Mississippi, I believe, or I forgot where it was, and he met the devil there, and he sold his soul to the devil, and the devil tuned his guitar, and after that, his music was like the best music ever, for his time, of course. Um, and I've listened to his music. It does seem, there's definitely something about it. Not my particular cup of tea, of course, but there's something about his music that is almost enchanting in a way. I don't know if you've listened to it. Um, but yeah, and I mean, of course, the audio is not that good either because it was recorded, a long, long time ago. But it's based on that guy, and I keep forgetting his name. Robert, no, not Robert Johnson. Maybe it is Robert Johnson. I don't know. But um, the point is, this is what the movie is based on, kind of, and and um and the movie's called Sinners, and right away, what you're gonna realize is that everybody in this movie is a sinner, especially if we get to know them. Especially if the more we know about them, the more we realize that they're sinners. You know, the people that we don't know that much about, um, those people we don't get to see if they're sinners or not. Like, for example, the Native Americans. The Native Americans, they only have about like one scene, I believe, in the whole movie, and then after that, they're gone. But we don't know if they have committed a sin or not. But for example, Stack and Smoke, they're killers. They've spilled blood. They've stolen from people, and now they're trying to do things legitimately. But they have sinned. And ultimately the ultimate sin, or the last sin that they commit, is the love of money. Towards the end, they realize that it doesn't really matter, but we'll get to that. Then you have, because everybody has a different path, right? And everybody, realizes their actual sins, towards the end of the movie. And the guitar player, um, you know, he his sin was pretty much lying to his father. But if you notice in the movie, he didn't really care about money. I think the guitar player is probably the most innocent person of the whole movie, because his main goal is music. and he loves music, but he wants to be free when it comes to his music. He wants to be free with his art. And unfortunately, within the Christianity or the Christian faith, there's not a lot of liberty and there's not a lot of freedom to play the music you want to play, because there's a lot of fear in Christianity, especially in this movie. The way Christianity was portrayed in this movie, these are one of the people that are free of sin. But it's like I said, we know very little about the Christians in this movie. We see the Christians only a handful of times, or less than a handful of times. And first we see them, and the churches is pretty much looks like a hut. It looks like a slave house. That's what it looks like. And from what I remember, it doesn't have windows. It barely has a door. Square door. And I was talking about that in the last video too, where when people live in fear, fear of the devil, fear of evil, fear of sin, when they live in constant fear of all of these things, they lose the capability and the freedom of art and the creativity that comes with that. And if you look at the way the Christians were portrayed in this movie, they were portrayed pretty much that way. They were portrayed as people that were in a place where they were safe from the elements. They were safe from the evil spirits, the vampires. They were safe from the KKK. They were safe from everything, but they weren't free. They weren't free to express themselves. They weren't free to. It looked like they were locked in there, to be honest with you. You go in there and there's not a lot of even light. It looks dark in there. And like I said, it's just a white building, very plain, very simple, and it looks like it's like a safe house. But a safe house, there's no freedom in a safe house. You're pretty much locked in there until you decide to come out eventually, and not be afraid. So that's what I thought about the Christians in this movie. How they were portrayed. And it makes sense, to be honest with you, with a lot of Christians and the way they believe and the way they think about sin and the way they think about the devil and evil and all of these dangerous things, that you're supposed to be confined to these rules and regulations in order for you to be safe. And in a sense, in the movie, they were safe. Like I said, no harm came to these people. But at the same time, they never experienced what the people in the juke joint experienced. They didn't experience what they experienced, which is pretty much a connection to the past, present, future, a connection to something that's higher than them, a higher power, pretty much God. They didn't experience that. Or at least we didn't see them experience that. Everybody was dressed the same way. If you notice, when they go in there, first of all, the building was white. There was zero art to the building, and then when you go inside, everybody was dressed the same way. Everybody was dressed in white. So and so what you could see is the difference between these two religions. One of them being voodoo, and the other one being Christianity. And there was other religions, for example, that are not named religions, but are definitely act like religions, in my personal opinion. Like, for example, the religion of hate, or the religion of racism. These people, they can dedicate their lives to hate people that are not like them, and to love things that look like them. They want to make everything look like them. They want Jesus to look like them. They want Buddha to look like them. They want all the credit for them, or for them to get all the credit for all of the inventions. They want to kill people that don't look like them, and they want to oppress people that don't look like them. And this is really an extreme love of self. That's what I see in the KKK, the way the KKK acts and maneuvers is a very terrestrial, way, kind of like people that are stuck in this realm and the mentality of material things. Um, that's how, in my opinion, that's what their problem is, and people like that are usually very cowardly. If you could see the way the movie ended, you know when you spend your life on identity stuff like that is built on the way you look, and the whiteness of your skin. When you die, it's very empty, and you begin to think that you wasted your time on bullshit, things that really don't matter in the end. You're gonna die anyways. But if you look at the religion of the uh, the African voodoo people, they weren't really afraid to die. In fact, if you notice, they were kind of ready to die, and to go on to the ancestors, and to meet with the ancestors. Why? Because their belief was that there was an afterlife, and with the afterlife, you become part of this big family of ancestors that continues to help the living. Which is similar to animism, and that's why I like all of the elements of animism that I saw, and I'm gonna talk about them. The ancestor connection, to where animists do believe that they're connected to the ancestors, but they believe that the only difference is that they believe that the ancestors, could be in the rivers, could be in the seas, could be in the trees, in the rocks, in the ground, in the animals that you see, in all types of things, the wind, the clouds. This, is your family, pretty much, because your family, when they die, it comes back as that, and we're all pretty much one. So it's very similar in that sense. The other way that animism is similar to African voodoo is it wasn't spoken here as it being a religion, but in my opinion, the juke joint, you know and the way they congregate there, and the way they worship there, you know, was similar to animism. Um, was similar to animism in the sense that they would do rituals like this, because one of the main things that animism was about was it called sex. I was trying to use another word, but the creation of humans, or the reproduction of more humans, was one of the main things within animism, which means that you have to have sex, right? And because of this, there was a lot of sex ceremonies, and these ceremonies included alcohol, music, and of course, the main ingredients, sex. And the other thing, it was that women were encouraged to have several partners, or to have sex with several men in these ceremonies, and they were the main attraction of these ceremonies were the females, were the women. And so it's the opposite of today, where men are encouraged to have several partners, and women are not. In fact, they're shamed if they do have several partners. But in the days of animism, which is back in the Paleolithic era, this is how the ceremonies were, all right. And if you notice in this movie, in the juke joint, the people that had more than one lover were all women. If you notice that. So, for example, the mixed girl, the half white girl, she had a husband. He left his husband to go back with Michael B. Jordan, right? Because he loved Michael B. Jordan. Um, or the character, I forgot if it was Smoke or Stack, one of those guys, because they look alike, so I get confused. But anyways, so she had two lovers pretty much, right? And then there's another lady that is trying to get with the guitar player. Which, by the way, if you know anything about that particular artist that I just talked about a couple of minutes ago, he loved the married women, right? That was his thing. And the thing about that is that's why he got killed. I think he got poisoned by one of the guys that he took his wife from, and then he decided to just poison him and give him a drink, and he died. So, but what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So if you notice that the females in the juke joint that were having sex with these guys in the juke joint, they had other partners, but the men, they didn't really, and if they did, they didn't emphasize it on it. No, like we didn't know anything about the past lovers of any of the men. If you realize that, that reminds me a lot of animism, and how animism. So animism is a very interesting religion, and it's one of my favorite religions to talk about. Um, because it shows how things used to be, and then it also shows, if you know the history of animism, it shows you when it changed and why it changed. um out of the men that were getting left out, that weren't having sex, those were the guys that were pushed out of these areas where this religion was practiced. And then those guys were the ones that developed an alphabet, developed um what is domesticating animals like cows and horses, um, and I think dogs as well. But I think dogs were domesticated even for the hunter gatherers that practice animism. So I'm not sure which one exactly, because it's the connection between man and dog it's been around since forever. But for sure, cows and horses were developed by the people from, Russia and these places where they, like Mongolia and places like that. They were considered barbarians to, you know, um, the people that lived in more Mediterranean areas that were more like hunter gatherers in those times. So, anyways, those people, some of them, that weren't having sex, some of them became kind of gay in a way, okay, because they had nothing else, and also they did other things with other um, non-human things. They also became cannibalists because there's not a lot of food up there in the cold, because it's colder up there in the Eastern European places and in the Russian places, and in the places of China and stuff like that. Not in China, above China. Um, so I wish I had a map so I could tell you what I'm talking about. And and those people basically, they had several tribes that they used to cannibalize against each other and everything. But there's the successful ones were the ones that came down to these tribes that practice animism, and they destroyed pretty much their religion, and they corrupted the way sex was looked at. and that's when sex started becoming more of. That's when when male based religions began. Our gods became more male based. When in the past most of our gods were female based. Mother Earth, and like things were about giving. Like Mother Earth would give, and give you trees, give you leaves, plants. It sprung forth life. And that's the same thing with women. That's why we venerated women, because women also brought forth life. you know but we flipped that, because of these, different, humans, and we made it more about taking. And if you notice, a lot of the gods that came after that, were more about taking, like Zeus. Zeus wanted something to take it from you. Zeus was known to trick women into having sex, raping women. A lot of the gods would rape women. Um, this is how we get the religion that we have now, which is a religion that you either follow me, or I will put you in eternal hell or eternal damnation. So that's how we got to where we are today. And so, like I said, me saying this, it's not saying that it's bad what we have today or it's good. I'm just letting you know why we're here and why things used to be the way they were. And so getting back to the movie, towards the end, there's the vampires show up. And throughout the movie, you start realizing that a lot of these factions and religions, you know everybody follows their particular rules, but nobody really has a lot of freedom, and freedom of expression, and what they want to do, what they want to say. And the only ones that do seem to have a lot of freedom, but they don't really agree with each other that much, are the people from the juke joints, which I would want to call them the animists. That's what I'm going to call them. Um, and they don't necessarily agree with each other all the time. They argue with each other. They have problems with each other, and most people would consider them sinners, and they are sinners. Not just sinners in the rule books of religions, of certain religions, of the Muslim religion, even in the Christian religion. They would be sinners in several religions, but they're also sinners in the sense that, um, they sin against themselves through money. And that's the one thing that I want to focus on in a little bit, because if you remember when the vampires first show up, you know Remy, he goes to a house, and the first thing that these guys that see the vampire, they think is, he's a stranger, we're not gonna let him in, and he looks weird. So they humans, have an innate ability to perceive danger, and sometimes they're right not to trust people. They're right not to trust people that look different or whatever. It's just an innate thing that we have in our brains, that if we see something that we don't know, we stay away from it, right? And so these people, that instinct kicked in, and they were like, "Nah, we ain't letting you in," But then Remy says, "I got money," and then immediately, boom, this love for money was what killed them. Was the main thing that got them into trouble, was letting Remy into their house, because vampires, they need to be invited in. So they invited in this demon because of their love of money. So already from the beginning, when we first see Remy, we realize that he's representing this almost like capitalist mentality, or this this thing that people lose their identity for, or their freedom for. And if you notice, when Remy bites someone and turns someone into vampires, they pretty much lose their souls, and they lose their ability to speak for themselves. Everything that they knew now becomes his memory, and everything that he knows becomes their memory. So they make a comment to this pretty much this hive mind mentality. They don't speak for themselves anymore. Now the Remy speaks for them, and you see that all throughout the film. And this is something that's going on in today's era, to where you hear people talk, but they're not really talking. They're you hear somebody else behind them talking, maybe Tucker Carlson, or and you're like, yeah, I think I heard that before. But yeah, I really like the movie. But really quick, guys, I wanted to talk about, the thing that I was talking about last time, which is how religion determines how we move forward, in the future of humanity. And I mentioned animism, and how that animism helped us get out of the wild. If it helped us beat the elements and beat all the other animals that were out to get us, and we got us out of the food chain into where we are now. But calculating by that, today's day and age, we have three main religions. Okay, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, or the Muslim religion. And the thing about these religions is that both of these religions believe in a final apocalypse, in a day of reckoning for the world. And judging by the way in the past, religion has helped us move forward, and has pretty much predicted what would happen in the future of humanity. Kind of like a guiding light, or even like a thing that could help you predict where humanity is going to go in the future. I believe that because these three religions are in power due to popularity, and due to, in the case of the Jews, they're in control of these two religions in a way. But due to that fact, I feel like the future of the world is grim. It's there's a lot of people that are going to die because they believe in the final apocalypse. You look at the Christians, they believe that there's going to be a tribulation, and that there's going to be an antichrist that's going to come down and trick people into not believing in Jesus, and stuff like this. And that a lot of people are going to die. There's going to be a World War III, pretty much. And only after that, those that survive will be left here, and they're all going to be Christians, and they're all going to worship Jesus Christ and God, right? But then you go to the Muslims, who are the second most popular religion in the world. And what do they believe? They believe pretty much the same thing. They believe that the world is going to go into a World War III. A lot of people are going to die, but the people that survive are going to all be Muslims, right? And then you look at the Jews. What do they believe? They believe that that their Messiah is going to come, and that he's going to take over the world, and that the Jews are going to be in control. They're going to, and I feel like without noticing, because even a lot of the secret societies, are also, even though they're different from each other, without knowing, they're going to a final goal, which is mass destruction of a lot of people.